Hey team, g'day, I'm Michael with Simon. He's just asked me to touch base with you about a couple of items with regard to your shed extension. I'll try and make it as fast and as easy as I can, and then I'll give you a couple of options and you guys can make a decision and let me know what you want to do. So first of all, okay, importance levels. In the building code, there's a different range of importance levels, and that's your risk of failure during an earthquake or they call it an event, but you know, earthquakes and 1 or 2 down there. So obviously, if there's an earthquake in a shed, like a garage, the risk to human health and human well-being is much reduced than if it was a house, because there's people sleeping in the house. Could be 2 stories, you know. So a house is an importance level 2, and it has higher level of risk mitigation through, generally in your instance, it's bracing. So your shed currently, to be honest, the level of bracing that we have in a shed now far exceeds what a 1990s house has. So I would rather be in a shed in an earthquake, like a Christchurch earthquake, in Skyline shed than certainly than in a house from the 1990s. But the rules are the rules, right? So I'm just going to take you through those now, and then you guys can make a decision about what you want to do. The existing building, where are we? Oh, it's funny when you do a draft and then you look back and you see how many spelling mistakes there are. Quite frightening. So that will all get tidied up. I do apologise. Existing bracing. Alright, so your existing plan, I've laid out the bracing. So the bracing can be a little bit more spread out in an importance level 1 building. It also doesn't need to be as high. And the way that the bracing is transferred across one another doesn't have to be in the same plane. So essentially, if you imagine let's say a big wind came through here. Actually, let's make it an earthquake. An earthquake comes through here. Now, it's never going to hit the same location at exactly the same time. So this strap brace here, which is a Sky 1800, and these 2 here, when that hits, the load is going to be transferred along in a shed, along the roofing line, and then down to these braces here. So this wall's not just reliant on this brace, it's also using some of this wall's bracing when it hits. That's the basic principle. There's a lot more to it than that, but hopefully that gives you some understanding of what's going on there. Now, it's not doing it through a roof is not a good way to do it. It doesn't connect the top plates very well, and it can cause the building to rack and twist. But of course, in a shed, that's not really a big deal. Like in a shed, all we're trying to do is stop it from falling down and killing someone if they're in there. Or actually, it actually says serious harm. So causing serious harm. So that's the consequence of a failed shed is relatively low compared to a house where you might have children sleeping in a bed or all sorts of things. And a sleep out is considered a house. So there's only 2 terms really. There's outbuilding, which is a shed, and dwelling, which is a house. So a sleep out still comes under the code of a dwelling, and it still comes under importance level 2. So it has significantly more bracing, and it's spread out much more evenly around the building, so that each wall, when it's loaded, has more resistance than perhaps in a shed it does. Because you notice on this big long wall here, there's only like a tiny little brace here, and that's because they're allowing that wall could twist all the way out, and this wall will soak it up. And even though that wall's going to fail and pop off and all that kind of stuff, the actual risk to the human beings in that shed, and probably most likely just objects, is relatively low. That is unlike a house, where we're trying to brace each wall independently and then brace them across each other. Now, up to 6 meters, we're using the jib diaphragm, the ceiling, to create that plane where when this moves, it's got a nice solid structure and it pushes hard against this side, and they're both moving together in parallel. Unlike a shed where it's twisting and bending, this is trying to move. There is going to be twisting and bending moments in this as well, but it's much reduced in both planes. So you can see that by making this one here, obviously is importance level 1. So what we're doing is we're treating this importance level 1 and this importance level 2. What I can't do is take this wall out and then make the whole thing importance level 1 and importance level 2. It needs to be one or the other. So your options are Oh, and sorry, so, and obviously you've got the other habitable codes. There's 27 of them, and they're broken down into different sections. Like G is broken into 13 sections, and each one of those sections is broken down into sections, and so on. But that dictates how this is insulated, what linings we use, how those linings are impervious to water, how they manage external moisture, how they manage internal moisture, and all those types of things. And so obviously on a garage or a shed you have 3. You've actually got 5 because you've got a bathroom. So right here you're covering 5. Here we would cover, because we've got no kitchen, so we might cover 22, 23. So you can see the complexity increases dramatically for that building, and so the price does as well. Now, if we take this wall out, I then have to make the entire thing an importance level 2 building. So I'm going to run braces all the way through. I can't use the roofing iron like it's currently used, so we're going to have to put what's called a ceiling diaphragm all the way through there. And that can be jib, screwed off at certain centers and a certain thickness. It can be ply, again, nailed and screwed at certain centers, and that's really expensive, by the way. And if you do want to go with that, I'll show you why it's expensive, but basically it's just way more labor, and the material is quite a lot more expensive too. And then we can use steel straps, so like a cross brace that goes through, but I can't spec that. We need a structural engineer to spec that. So that's, if you want to take that wall out, that's what I'll have to do, is turn basically the whole thing into a house, which is fine. If that's what you want to do, no problem at all. But that's the choice, obviously, to give you guys an option. Alternatively, if we take this out, this could become a workshop. So this entire area here could become a workshop, which means I can go back to using the roof as a plane. It's a bit overspan, but I can get Skyline Auckland's engineer, their shed engineer, to sign that off. So we wouldn't need a ceiling through there, and then we can just use level importance, level 1. I generally, to be honest, do all my garages to importance level 2 because it's such a small difference between the two, but it is a distinct difference, and so probably end up all being at importance level 2 anyway, and I can show you all those bracing calculations so you can see that it's nice and safe. But that would be a shed and a workshop, and then we could take that wall out. Obviously the final thing is to have this habitable and this not habitable, as we've proposed in the draft, but that means you need to keep this wall in here, because this wall here is doing the bracing for this space, and it's connected through the jib ceiling that's through there, and this wall here is doing the bracing for this space. So this is your importance level 1 bracing, and this is your importance level 2 bracing. Now, it's not actually quite as simple as I've suggested, but hopefully it gives you a really good understanding of what your options are. So your options are, we turn the whole thing into a workshop, we turn the whole thing into a habitable, and 3, we leave it as is. So those are your 3 options. And also I'd love to know a little bit about what you want to do for your glazing. We obviously have got the layout here. I just want to check, that the glazing is all correct. Not more spelling mistakes. So we're taking that one there and shifting it over to there, and then we're putting a new window in there. So you're going to have to go through this garage to get into the sleep out. I honestly don't know what council are going to think of that. We have to have a fire egress. I'm going to argue that there is fire egress through there, and also through your windows. But we'll just have to wait and see what council suggests there. It may be that they want a sliding door in there. I also note that there's no kitchen on site and no dwelling on site. Some of the councils, not the West Coast councils, but they are changing. A lot of the councils define an ancillary building as being dependent on a major dwelling. So if you put a sleep out on, you can't, like in most council areas, you can't put a sleep out without having a main house, because they say, well, a sleep out has to be dependent on a house, otherwise that's the house. West Coast to date have been really good about just not worrying about that and using some common sense, but there is always the chance that we get one, I call them Hitlers, one little Hitler in there who decides he wants to enforce Auckland or Christchurch type rules on the West Coast, and we could always cut them a little bit unglued with putting a sleep out onto a shed without having an actual dwelling for it to be associated with, because they're going to say, well, if you're going to be sleeping in there, you're also going to be cooking in there. If you're going to be cooking in there, you're also going to be living in there. So that's a dwelling. And then, of course, you trigger even more regulations. Awesome. All right, well, I hope that gives you a really good understanding. So if you could flick me an email back. I'm a little bit, because I'm running a little bit behind because of COVID. I had COVID and then my family had COVID and we haven't really been able to catch up. That's hence the delay, and I do apologize for that. So probably the best thing to do is email me if you possibly can. But if it's something you really feel like needs a voice conversation, just flick me a text and I'll ring you back when I'm out of a meeting. Because I seem to be running around going from meeting to meeting at the moment, just trying to catch up since COVID. So, all right, guys, thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry we had to meet just on a video. We didn't get to meet in person, but next time I'm down that way, I'll call in and say hello. Thanks very much, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.